Hi, and thanks for joining me on this episode of Tether's Customer Experience Podcast. I'm Robert Beasley, CEO of conversation intelligence platform Tether. Today, I'm going to be continuing my conversation with Matt Dixon and Ted McKenna. If you didn't listen to the last episode, go back and hear about how they started the sales research that became the foundation for their new book, The JOLT Effect. Today, we're going to talk about customer indecision, what it is, and how to identify it. Matt and Ted, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Thanks for having us back.
You bet. For those who have never heard of customer indecision, can you explain what you mean by that and how you saw it impacting sales results?
Yeah, Ted, you want to take that one? I think we can all personally attest to what indecision is, because the truth is most of us probably struggle with it at some level. Yeah. We know that from the research. But Ted, you want to take a first swing on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think on a practical level, most sellers will recognize it as just situations when the customer is unwilling to make a decision. You know, so they're stalled, they're stuck. Mm-hmm. You know, they're spinning their wheels. You feel like you've made some momentum, and I think it's particularly frustrating in situations when it feels like the buyer seems kind of excited. You know, either they've called me and they've told me they want this thing, and now all of a sudden, like, they're not purchasing. What's going on? Or they've just attached to certain things along the way, and you feel like you've gained momentum, but then they got the cold feet, and it's just sort of, they're going dark on that front. Can't get them on the phone. And so forth. So the practical ways in which this shows up, but at a very fundamental human level, we found indecision to be representative of very sort of emotional type of situations that buyers would express in different ways, sometimes explicitly, but often implicitly, as they look to convey to that seller, hey, this is the reason why I want to delay this meeting, or this is how I'm feeling about this part of the sale, or can you tell me more about, like, we heard a lot more questions like, can you tell me more about this? Like I know you've already explained this 6 times, but can you explain it to me a 7th time, you know? Or they start asking for the 25th demo, you know, and you're wondering, like, wait, the 24th demo didn't actually ask the question that you had. So it comes across in lots of different ways, but again, sort of at a base emotion level here, there's lots of different uncertainties, confusion, frustrations, and so forth that the buyer's looking to articulate.
Yeah, I think we do, Robert, when we present the research to sales teams, we do a kind of a show of hands exercise where we ask them to think about all of their losses over the prior year or quarter or whatever time frame, and then we say, you know, bucket those into 2 categories. What percentage of those losses do you think were to a named competitor? So the customer did something, they bought something, just not from you, and so how many of them were to no decision? So the customer just didn't do anything. And what you find is the vast majority of hands go up around no decision. In our research, we found it was anywhere between 40 and 60% of all deals are lost to no decision. Now, I think a lot of the really frustrating thing is what Ted said before, is that so many of those are cases where the customer just kind of ghosts you and sort of starts going radio silent. They were really engaged. They seemed really fired up. They said they wanted to move forward. Then it's like, was it something I said? Like, it just, things kind of fizzle out, right? The responses you get from the customer get farther and farther apart, and they get shorter and shorter, you know, very curt replies. They stop showing up for your demos. They go from, you know, customers, well, we talk about this in the research, everybody procrastinates. We wish that customers would move on our timetable, but they have day jobs. It's usually not to buy our stuff. And so they'll reschedule things, but you start seeing those reschedulings go from, like, hey, that Zoom call we're supposed to have on Monday, can we do it on Wednesday instead, to, hey, you know what, let's pick it up. Priorities are shifting. Let's pick it up next quarter, or better yet, next year. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it just feels like it's so frustrating for the salesperson, because they feel like they had the opportunity in hand. You know, they had that customer who agreed with their vision, customer who was like, yeah, the way we do things today is suboptimal. We got to move forward with you guys. Let's talk business. And then things just kind of fall apart. And it's so frustrating, because those sellers have spent so much time and energy into pursuing those opportunities. And it's so confounding, because you think, why would you as a customer, as a salesperson, I'm thinking, why would you as a customer waste all of your own time, not to mention your team's time, and all your legal department, procurement, just to end up doing nothing? Like, it's a loss for everybody. And it is absolutely frustrating and confounding to salespeople.
Definitely. And what are some of the ways that you measure indecision using Tether, and what were some of the key findings out of it?
I'll let you talk about that, Ted, but it was sort of a basket of emotions that we know from human psychology are markers of indecision. But Ted, also, if you could talk about it in a more technical sense, but I think what's just as interesting is how frequently it happens.
Not just that, but so maybe Matt, I'll go into a little detail on sort of what specifically we kind of measured, but also how that differs from other buyer situations that we were able to find too, in terms of status quo and kind of the direction that most sellers go in those situations. Because I think that's just as important. They're sort of spotting it incorrectly and treating it differently. So quite literally inside of Tether, there's a whole bunch of what Tether calls library categories that get into to Matt's point, the sort of basket of emotions. So when that buyer is expressing some level of indecision, it will come across quite literally as, I'm uncertain about this decision. And so there's a whole series of literally hundreds of different phrases associated with decision uncertainty, confusion about the path forward. I'm not sure, whether I should go down path A or path B. Can you help me out? And so again, hundreds of different ways in which a buyer might articulate that at different moments, even frustration about the process. This is getting kind of ridiculous. I wish I had more information about this. That lack of information we talk about in the book is probably the place you see most often that sort of frustration, because it's like, why can't I get more? Give me more. And there's sort of this constant feeling like you're this outsider when you have all the information already. It's like, what are you so uncertain about by now? Because I've given you everything I possibly could give you, and you're asking questions that even my most loyal customers have never asked me before. So that's kind of how we went about measuring it. But Matt, do you want to give a little more detail on, again, it's not just the indecision moments, it's also in contrast to other situations that sellers get kind of confused by themselves about how they should move forward.
Well, I think we'll, as we get into that, what's the conventional wisdom maybe around indecision? But I would say, just to put a kind of punctuation mark on what Ted's described here, much more articulately than I would have, by the way. But when we're able to look at this basket of emotions and kind of measure it in if you will, frequency or quantity or magnitude in different sales opportunities or sales conversations. And what we found was, and this was really eye-opening to us, that in 87% of all of the conversations we studied as part of the research, you had customers expressing either moderate or high levels of those emotions associated with indecision. And so only 13% of customers were just like, nope, I'm ready to go. Like no hesitation, no confusion, no decision uncertainty, like let's go. If you think about that as a salesperson, and I think sometimes salespeople conclude, well, this is easy. I just won't sell to the indecisive customers. And the problem is, if only 13% of them are decisive, then there's not enough of them out there to hit your number or to help your organization grow. And so you've got to deal with it. And as we talked about last time, it's everywhere. 87% of your opportunities, but yet salespeople have never been taught to detect it. They've never been taught to look for it. But it's all around them. And it is toxic for win rates. I mean, it is a straight negative correlation between level of indecision and win rate. And when you start getting into those highly indecisive customers, I mean, your win rate is no better than throwing a dart blindfolded at a dartboard. It's really, really like low single digits.
I go so far as to say, I think, again, on the sort of inbound call situations, remember, as part of the book, we look at lots of different settings, highly complex, solutions-based sales that take months, all the way down to very transactional things, sales that only take 30 minutes or less. I think in some ways, I almost like take inspiration from the transactional channel in terms of how they handle that. Because if you think about those individuals, they had no control over who was calling when they picked up that phone. But the best JOLT Effect sellers in those settings, honestly, we're sort of assuming, look, the reason they're calling me is because they're indecisive. Yeah. They could have bought on their own, and yet they're still calling us. So I think that's actually an interesting lesson for all of us to take, which is there's a role we as sellers play in helping our buyers to overcome indecision. I'd rather assume you have indecision and treat that than the other way around and sort of hope that it's not there.
And this is true, looking complex solutions out there in B2B, we talked about last time some of how this work is kind of building on some of that research we've done in the past around Challenger. Remember that, Robert, this data point we share with the Challenger research, that the customer, the B2B customers, 57% of the way through the buying journey before they ever talk to a salesperson. But if you think about that in our daily lives, like you're like 99% of the way through. Ted just bought a car yesterday, right, Ted? And so and I think did a ton of research beforehand, and like he just, he did all the research, decided exactly what he wanted, had found the dealership that had the car he wanted, was willing to sell it to him on the terms that were preferable, and or that he wanted, and that was it, right? And so you go in and you meet the salesperson, but you don't really want him to sell you anything. You just want him to fulfill the order you've already kind of placed. And these are things that are much worse in our, these are kind of extreme. So as Ted's talking about those indecisive customers, I think it is a really good lesson in business to business today. And there was some recent research by McKinsey about the price points that customers are paying for solutions bought on their own online, which is now in the $100,000 range, which is kind of crazy to think about. We always assume, well, but in consumer, that's very commonplace that we would go and do all that research and never even talk to somebody. So the very fact that you had to pick up the phone and call and you requested a demo or you wanted to talk to somebody at the vendor suggests there's something going on here. And that is as Ted said, that's a golden opportunity for that salesperson to overcome that indecision the customer is dealing with.
Yeah, great point. So in the research, at what point in the sales process or even in a sales conversation did you notice indecision start to emerge?
We get this question. We got this question just the other day from a CSO, and Ted and I have been talking a lot about this. I think we get two kinds of questions. And so maybe if I could back up, Robert, what I'd say is, the conventional wisdom in sales has always been that if a customer gets cold feet, it's because you didn't beat the status quo, right? Because they believe what they do today is good enough, or they don't believe your product or your service or your solution is a more compelling alternative. And so we've always taught salespeople, look, if that customer starts to backpedal after they said they want to buy it, you just got to go and put that status quo zombie to bed, right? It's like it's coming back. You haven't committed. So you salespeople in our analysis, they tend to do one of two things, most of them, the vast majority. They either go back and they try to convince the customer again of how great the solution is. Like, Robert, you must not have heard me when I said that our solution is twice as fast as what you
I wasn't persuasive enough. I need to do a better.
I know. Robert, you must have missed how awesome this feature is. Did you see how many zeros are on that ROI projection? It's all, it's huge. So it's that, or, if that doesn't work, what most salespeople then do is they put away the carrot, they break out the stick, and they start using the FUD techniques, right? I'm going to try to scare you into action by pointing out that, Robert, these problems are not going to solve themselves. And remember, you told me a while ago, you guys feel like you're losing ground to competitors. And I can assure you, you are, because we work with your competitors and they're all gapping you in the market. And like, you try to make the customer squirm and feel like they're going to miss out on a golden opportunity. What we found, we're surprised by this, that approach as woven into the way we sell as it is, it's handed down from leader to manager to rep for generations now, actually backfires more often than it works out. It actually leads to more customer losses to no decision, makes it more likely your customer will do nothing. It wasn't really clear to us why until we took a step back and we realized that a no decision loss is actually driven by two different things. One of them is when the customer prefers their status quo. You didn't prove to me that what I do today is not good enough. I think what we do today is fine. Or you didn't make your case that your solution is a vastly superior alternative. And we all see this in sales, right? You never got over the value hump. And there's plenty of losses. About 44% of the time, it's because the customer, is still in the vice grip of the status quo. But 56% of the time, it has nothing to do with the status quo. It's because of their own indecision about changing the status quo. And when we break that apart, what we actually found is that there were three sources of indecision. We've relied a lot on the human psychology research to help explain this. The first one is, I'm sold on leaving the status quo, and I'm sold on doing business with you, but what version of Tether should I buy? Should I get the 3-year contract? Should I get the 5-year contract? Do I need the professional services? Can I do it myself? How many seat licenses do I want? How many builders do I want in Tether? Do I want 1? Do I want 5? Do I want 10? There's so many decisions our customers deal with, and we love putting more things in front of them, more options. Look at all these partner integrations. Check out the roadmap. Like, you got all this great stuff. And what seems like a good thing can lead to the customer struggling when it all looks good, making the wrong choice. So we call it a valuation problem. The second one is a lack of information. I don't feel like I've done enough homework. There's so many vendors out there I've never heard of before. This is new to us. We need to become an expert like you are. You're a salesperson. You're an expert on conversation intelligence, but we're not an expert yet. We need to become an expert. We need to consume more content. And then the third one we call outcome uncertainty, which is where the customer is saying, yeah, but what if this doesn't pan out for us? What if this whole thing goes sideways? Your reference customers love you. Those success stories look awesome. The demo was great. The pilot was amazing. But what if it goes sideways? If it does, it's going to be my butt because my name's on the contract. And especially now, right? As budget scrutiny is up, companies are very loath to waste money on things, to buy software and tools and resources that nobody ends up using, get value out of. So those are the three sources of indecision. Now, what's interesting is none of those have anything to do with the status quo. So you could easily have a customer who says, yeah, I believe what we do today stinks. I believe that you are the vendor we should work with, but instead is struggling with, but which version of what configuration should I buy? Mm-hmm. What version of your solution? Have I done enough homework? Have I gotten any assurance from this vendor that this is all going to work out and we're going to achieve those benefits they're talking about? And so if I go back and I just try to convince you as a customer that like, no, you missed it, how great our solution is, and look at our ROI projection, or I try to scare you, and I'm not worried about those things as a customer, we actually make things worse, not better. So, this is a big problem, I think, for salespeople right now, is that they've actually been taught to go and do something and to pursue a playbook, which is just break out your status quo hammer. And when you do that, it's like every indecisive customer looks like a nail. And you have a high probability of doing something, making it worse, not better. If I were to summarize what I'd actually tell you is, the two playbooks we need in sales. One, you got to beat the customer status quo. You're not going to sell anything if they think what they do today is good enough, or your solution is not a superior alternative. So you got to do that. And there's lots of books on how to do that. There's Challenger, there's many others, lots of research. And we've all in sales been taught how to do that. But once you do that, you got to overcome customer indecision. And where beating the status quo is about dialing up the fear of not purchasing, overcoming indecision is about dialing down the fear of purchasing. How do we make that customer feel like you're making a great decision? You don't need to be an expert here. I'm an expert and you're in great hands with me. Or you've done just enough research, you can confidently pull the trigger. And then finally, we've got your back. We're not going to leave you holding the bag. This is not going to go sideways. And if it does, we're going to get back on track quickly. You're not going to look like a fool. You're going to look like a hero. Because at the end of the day, I think what this tells us is customers, they're okay missing out. They are not okay with messing up. And we cannot put them in a position as salespeople where they feel like they might mess up. And that's what the whole book is about. How do we jolt them into action and make them feel like they're making a great decision?
I would just add, I think it's tempting for sellers to assume that playbook for indecision is only necessary late, because that's when they start to notice that level of indecision, because that's when the cold feet start to present itself. Well, we actually find it happens much earlier, and we're just missing those signs earlier on, or we should be using those signs as a way to help us understand how likely this person or this company is going to buy, and incorporating that into my forecast, or how or I think about qualifying that opportunity. It does, of course, happen later on as well, but often there are things that you could have been doing along the way to lessen that and to make them feel better about that purchase. So unfortunately, maybe it's not the most satisfying answer, but it kind of happens all over the place, and you kind of have to spot it and deal with it in different places.
Yeah, I think Ted well said. And if it pops up at the very end and you're surprised by it, it's probably a good indicator to you as a salesperson that it was there all along, and you weren't doing what you could to identify it and deal with it and manage it in a productive way.
Yeah, you're trying to sweep it under the rug and just hope that it doesn't come back to haunt you at the end of the deal.
Well, and then what happens, Robert? Then that's when we toss out the discount. Like, maybe this will be the thing,
Right. That's right.
And did you notice any differences by industry?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Well,
no. So I'll have my answer, and then we'll compare my answer to Matt's, and we'll see if it differs. We didn't see as many differences as you might think across industry. I think this sales cycle time, of course, is going to make some difference, especially on the question we just asked, which is, where and how does this present itself? The size of the decision, the size of the purchase. These are things that will exacerbate the level of indecision when this becomes a big decision with lots of budget dollars associated with it and lots of eyeballs on it and so forth. So those things will I think matter with respect to how this plays out. But at the end of the day, buyers are human, and that's true whether you're purchasing, a new pair of jeans, in a store, Just as true as if you're buying a new piece of software or a new, 1,000 widgets for your company. These are human drivers. That's where a lot of the social science helped us to understand it. And so because of that, we didn't see quite as many differences across different sales settings as you might think. From a behavioral standpoint on the sales rep side, we saw the same types of things be successful in all sorts of settings, again, irrespective of where they're selling. Now, the rate at which those things happen, instinctually or naturally will differ a little bit by context too. A B2B seller has been trained in a way that maybe sort of an inbound business consumer seller hasn't. And so the frequency at which they break those things out might change, but the power of them, the impact of them in those settings was quite the same, because again, we're all selling against the same human problem.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say is that's like the scene in Old School where James Carville says, "That was perfect. I got nothing in
it." That's great. Well, Matt, Ted, really appreciate your time again today. I look forward to picking up the conversation again in the next episode. If you missed the last episode, go back and listen to that. You can learn more at tether.com/jolt. And definitely subscribe to the channel. And next time when we pick it up, we'll talk to Matt and Ted about how to actually overcome indecision.